popular, as I won very handily the last election, mind you, that it might be a little louder, even though I don't have a trumpeter to make a call as I come in like I ordinarily do, that you might show me at least a little bit more. No, forgive me, I try not to act too obnoxiously. I was just playing. But no, it is my great honor and privilege to be here, if not in the land of my mother, certainly in Dixie, which supported out my mother. I would be very pleased to satisfy the concern that some people had. Many people here in Virginia have not had opportunity or perhaps capability to go to Norfolk for the Grand Exposition. So, you're welcome, child. You're welcome. Now, it has been asked on several occasions that I might deliver parts of my speech that I did at the opening of the exposition in May of this year, 1907, and I'm very happy to do so. So, with no further ado, at the outset, I wish to say a word of special greeting to all of you. This year, you have come to assist us in celebrating what was in very truth the birthday of this nation. For it was here, or at least in Jamestown, that the colonists first settled, in whose incoming, the growth of their own loins, and by the addition of newcomers from abroad, they were to make the people which 169 years later assumed the solemn responsibilities and weighty duties complete of One can remake one's body. One can't necessarily remake one's eyes. Oh, for heaven's sakes, it wasn't a good joke, but you could at least laugh at it. Yeah, there we are. Let's just back up a bit. Let's see. For it was here that the colonists first settled, and whose incoming, whose growth from their own loins, and by the addition of newcomers from abroad, was to make the people which 169 years later assumed the solemn responsibilities and the weighty duties of complete independence. Oh, that is a vast improvement. But the fact that so many of our people, of whom it happens to be myself and one, I have a very small portion of English blood in my veins, and in no way alters the fact that me and others like me, that this nation was founded by Englishmen, by the Cavalier and the Puritan. Their tongue, law, literature, the fund of their common thought, made an inheritance which all of us share, and marked deep the lines which we have developed. It was the men of English stock who did most in casting the mold to which our national character was run. From almost every nation of Europe, we have drawn some part of our blood, some part of our traits. This mixture has gone on from the beginning, and with it has gone on for a kind of development unexampled among the peoples of the stocks from which we spring, and hence today we differ sharply from, and in yet some ways are fundamentally akin to, all the nations of Europe. We have met to celebrate the opening of the exposition, which itself commemorates the first permanent settlement of men of our stock in Virginia, the first beginning of what has since become this mighty republic. 300 years ago, a handful of English adventurers who had crossed the ocean. They were not the first men of European race to settle in what is now the United States, for they were already Spanish settlements in Florida on the headwaters of the Rio Grande, and the French, who at almost the same time were struggling up the St. Lawrence, were likewise destined to form permanent settlements on the Great Lakes and in the valley of the mighty Mississippi, before the people of English stock went westward of the Alleghanies. Moreover, both the Dutch and the Swedes were shortly to found colonies between the two sets of English colonies, those that grew up around the Potomac and those that grew on what is now the New England coast. Nevertheless, this landing at Jamestown possesses for us of the United States an altogether peculiar significance, and without disregard to our several origins. They, the men who landed at Jamestown, and those who 13 years later landed at Plymouth, all of English stock, and of their fellow settlers who during the next few decades streamed in after them, were those who took the lead in shaping the life history of this people in the colonial and revolutionary days. It is they who bent into definite shape our nation while it was still young enough to bend most easily, most readily, to take on the characteristics which were to become part of its permanent life habit. Yet, leave us remember that while the early English colonial stock has left deeper than all others upon our national life the mark of its strong twin individualities, the mark of the Cavalier and the mark of the Puritan, nevertheless, this stock is not only from its environment but also from the presence with it of other stocks, almost from the beginning, began to be differentiated strongly from any European people. As I have said, about the time of the first English settlers landing here, the Frenchman and the Spaniard, the Swede and the Dutchman, also came hither as permanent dwellers, who left their seed behind them to help shape and partially inherit our national life. The German, the Irishman, and the Scotchman came later, but still in colonial times. Before the outbreak of the Revolution of the American people, not only because of their surroundings, physical and spiritual, but because of the mixture of blood that had already begun to take place, represented a new and distinct ethnic type. This type has never been fixed in blood. All through the colonial days, new waves of immigration from time to time has swept hither across the ocean, now from one country, now from another. The same thing has gone on ever since our birth as a nation. And for the last 60 years, the tide of immigration has been at the full. The newcomers are soon absorbed into our eager national life and are rapidly and radically and profoundly changed thereby. The rapidity of their assimilation being marvelous, but each group of newcomers, as it adds its blood to the life, also changes it somewhat. And this change and growth and development has gone on steadily, generation by generation, throughout 3 centuries. Each of these prior generations has had its own troubles and concerns that they have had to face, as we have ours that we must in this modern age. And of all the questions which has come before this nation, short of the actual preservation of its existence in a great war, there is none which compares in importance with the great central task of leaving this land even a better land for our descendants than it is for us. And this, we must answer the question of how to utilize the natural resources of the nation in a way that will be of most benefit to the nation as a whole. In utilizing and conserving the natural resources of the nation, the one characteristic more essential than any other is foresight. Unfortunately, foresight is not usually the characteristic of a young and vigorous people, and it is obviously not a marked characteristic of us in the United States. Yet assuredly, it should be the growing nation with a future which takes on the long look ahead, and no other nation is growing so rapidly as ours or has a future so full of promise. No other nation enjoys so wonderful a measure of present prosperity, which can be of right be treated as an earnest of future success. And for no other are the rewards of foresight so great, so certain, and so easily foretold. Yet hitherto, as a nation, we have tended to live with an eye single to the present, and that we have permitted the reckless waste and destruction of much of our natural wealth. In 1891, Congress authorized the President to create national forests in the public domain. These forest reserves remained for a long time in the charge of the General Land Office, which had no men properly trained in forestry. But another department, that of Agriculture, possessed the trained men. In other words, the government forests were without foresters, and the government foresters were without forests. Oh, you may laugh at that. It's ridiculous. Waste of effort and waste of forest inevitably followed. Finally, the situation was ended in 1905 by the creation of the United States Forest Service, which has stopped the waste, conserved the resources of the national forests, and made them useful, so that our forests are now being managed on a coherent plan and in such a way that augurs well for the future. And further, in my view, the establishment of a Department of National Parks would be justified by consideration of a good administration, of the value of natural beauty as a national asset, and of the effectiveness of outdoor life and recreation in the production of good citizenship. We carry our heads high because our forefathers did well in the years that tried men's souls, and we did our turn to bear ourselves so that our children who come after us feel that we too have done our duty. Now, my friends, never minding written speeches, there are things that we don't have to acknowledge in a speech that each and every one of us knows surely. Everything foretold here, everything that I have been endorsing my entire life, has been the fact that this country is a great one, and it can be made greater on an individual basis, not by sitting back and watching others. There is nothing so abhorrent in my mind as somebody who will sit back and criticize and do nothing but. I would rather have a man walk around me who has tried 1,000 times and never succeeded once than I would have one that sat around and criticized and never had a failure. By heaven, applaud that. You should. I believe every decent person puts in their mind that I will help that other person who needs the assistance because he needs it, because he requires it, not because I might gain from it. My heaven, of all the religions of the world, the greatest one we have always heard, the one that carries from one to the next, is the one that speaks of the evidence of God's mark on all our hearts. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Rights are a grand and wonderful thing, but every one of them you have bears with it responsibility. You must keep in mind that none of those rights you have is a free gift. Your right to speak your mind gives you the right to speak up. Your right to go out and do a thing means you have a right and a responsibility to do a thing for someone that requires it. We are all set on that path. Each and every one of us must. This is what will make this country rise up from all the corruption and the wickedness that I've fought for so long, that men beside me have fought for so long. All we need to do in the individual is pull our own weight. Heaven's sakes. Well, the sermon is over. Now, you, my friends, it is not often one gets to meet the President of the United States. I didn't do it for quite some time until I got into the public sphere and had been invited to come to them. So now, you have an opportunity with me as one of the grand public servants of this nation to ask your questions. I do have a few minutes if there's something I might provide you by way of settling disagreements, concerns, or, well, let's just be honest, overwhelming applause and love. So, what questions have you? Is there anything I might settle for you? Yes?
How do you feel about women getting the right to vote?
I am very much of the opinion that, and it is a true opinion, that a woman's rights are absolutely no different from a man's. A woman's rights are identical. Which means that a woman ought to have the obligation of voting. Now, I do know from reading history that at one time, when I say obligation, I mean legal obligation. Because for a long time in these colonies, as well, when they were colonies, you voted because you had no choice. If you had the franchise, you voted or you were criminally prosecuted. You see, that implies that it was not deemed a right. Today, there is no penalty for not voting, which means it may be a social obligation, it may be a spiritual obligation, but it is no longer a legal obligation. Therefore, anything that you can do or not do is a right and not said otherwise. So I would be very much for seeing a female vote. Female suffrage, I think, is absolutely necessary. And the longer we delay, the longer we delay an improvement of our society. A long-winded answer for a short question, wasn't it? Yes, ma'am.
You've been many places in this beautiful country of ours. Do you have a favorite place that you'd like to vacation and spend time?
I like to go home. I'd like to go. Sagamore Hill is the place where I refresh spiritually and physically. Now, there are many places I love to be. I have a very fine little piece of property just in Albemarle County here in Virginia called Pine Knot. And you may thank Edith for that. She's the one that transfixed most of the business of having us there. I do love being in Pine Knot. I do love going over to the Dakotas again. The Devil's Tower in Wyoming, Texas, anywhere in this, any place that gets away from the cities. And I don't dislike the cities. I was born in the city. But no, I'd say going home, though, is the best. There ain't nothing like going home. I say.
How do you feel about the government owning people's land? What do you think about the Native Americans?
Well, I would say this. All the native peoples of America, they are citizens. Well, they are achieving the status of citizens as we go. The only thing that I would disagree to is the sentimentalist notion that puts these tribal connections before American citizenship. I would say that the sooner we can do away with those recognitions, the quicker we can go towards bringing them full rights as citizens of the United States. We have conquered the West. We have made it available to all citizens. Therefore, no, I'm quite pleased with having Indians set as proper American citizens, so long as we don't hyphenate that any more than we would hyphenate a German American or an English American or Japanese American or whatever it might be. Yes, sir.
What petitions did you run on that you feel got you elected president?
I believe it is most likely my dazzling wit and saintly personality.
Short answer.
Oh, very, very short and rather imprecise, I'm afraid. No, I would say that, no, I believe that even though there are those who disagree with me, none have any trouble determining what I feel about a thing. I have gone to the American people and spoken plainly. We have all seen those politicians that'll get before a group of people in a particular place, and then all of a sudden their drawl will start to increase because they happen to be in South Texas. Well, I don't change my voice for anybody. I am Harvard educated, and by heaven, that's how I talk to people. I don't care whether I'm talking to farmers. I don't care if I'm talking to men outside a factory in Pennsylvania. Makes no never mind to me whatsoever. So I believe that it is the decency that everyone knows that I simply identify, certainly not create it by any means, but I identify the decency that people see needs to be extended through yourselves and by extension through the government into others. And I say it in a plain way. I am coming forward exactly who I am, telling people exactly what I think. And because most people agree with me, I win landslide elections.
Talk about your time with Rough Riders and San Juan Hills.
That is some of the happiest times of my life. I had fun. I had fun. Now, don't take me wrong. I do not say that war is a good thing. I'm saying that good comes from war. War is the time that you will find men exposing the good, decent part of their spirit, their strength, and their souls. It is also the part that sometimes strips away that goodness. No two men will react the same way in the heat of battle. But I will say that my time in the Rough Riders, the United States Volunteer Cavalry, first of all, I am exceedingly pleased it was a volunteer force. Because these men that I spoke to, they were not drafted into service by any means. They came because they respected me and they respected the cause, and I am honored by that. I would say that the only thing I regret from my time in Cuba as being colonel of the volunteers is the fact that I did not walk away with a disfiguring scar. Because by heaven, I say it was fun. And I do not mind walking about telling people that I was there. I was frightened out of my wits on more than one occasion, very readily. But to have those men standing with me and following me up Kettle Hill and San Juan Hill, nothing makes a man prouder than knowing those men are out there listening to him, listening to his words. And to be quite honest, I don't believe we'd have done so well if I hadn't been there. Because God has gifted me a great thing. Humility. Well, you can talk to some of my opponents about my humility. But no, my time in the Rough Riders, some of the best times of my life right there. It wasn't a long time, but by heaven, it was a good one.
Mr. President, how is your health? I know you have suffered from asthma.
Yes. Yes, the gentleman asked how forgive me for not repeating the questions. I just now occurred to me to do that. My asthma is still a trouble. I still have other difficulties physically, but the trick of it is this. I was very, very weak when I was born, and now I only suffer from individual ailments. I am no longer weakened by those ailments. My ailments are a distraction. My father told me when I was 12 years old that I was not given I was given a keen mind, but not a keen body, and that I must make my own body. God gave me some wet, weak clay, but that wet, weak clay could be made into strong brick. My words, not his. But from that point forward, I began to exercise. I started stepping off on the strenuous life, as I call it. And I have been able to take all those difficulties I have physically, strengthen my body, strengthen my heart and my mind. And one strengthens the other, like iron sharpens iron, to paraphrase Scripture. So no, I do suffer greatly from the asthma from time to time still. But a bracing naked dip into the Potomac certainly settles things out a little bit. I think that helps. With no mixed company, I assure you.